I lay in the hospital bed staring at the message that had just appeared on my phone screen. My ribs ached with each breath, but that pain was nothing compared to what those 5 words did to my heart. Happy anniversary, failure. From Jessica, my fiancée of 2 years, who had left me alone in this sterile room 8 hours ago, with a quick excuse about an important meeting. The same woman who had promised to love me through sickness and health now disappeared when I needed her most. The irony was cruel. Before I tell you how I transformed the worst betrayal of my life into my greatest comeback, let me know where you are watching from today. Drop your city in the comments and hit that subscribe button if you want more real-life stories that prove rock bottom can be a foundation. I first met Jessica Thompson at Nexus Technologies, where we both worked. I was a software engineer with a reputation for solving problems others found impossible. My days consisted of lines of code and late nights troubleshooting, but I loved every minute of it. Jessica worked as a marketing director on the floor above mine. She had this way of commanding attention when she walked into a room, with her confident stride and infectious laugh. Our paths crossed during a company project that required our departments to collaborate. The attraction was immediate and intense. After several weeks of lunch breaks, spent together and conversations that stretched hours beyond our scheduled meeting times, I finally asked her out. Our first date was at a small Italian restaurant downtown. I remember how she talked passionately about her 5-year career plan and the places she wanted to travel. By the time we finished our tiramisu, I knew there was something special between us. The first 2 years of our relationship were everything I had ever hoped for. We traveled whenever we could get time off, creating memories in places like Seattle, New York, and a small beach town in Mexico that became our special spot. I was saving aggressively for our future, putting aside money for a house and the life we planned together. We talked about having 2 children, a golden retriever, and a home with enough yard space for barbecues with friends and family. On our second anniversary, I took Jessica to that same beach in Mexico where we had first said, "I love you." As the sun set over the Pacific, painting the sky with strokes of orange and pink, I got down on one knee. The ring I had chosen was a princess-cut diamond on a platinum band, elegant yet understated, just like her style. Or so I thought. When I asked the question, her eyes filled with tears and she whispered yes as she pulled me to my feet. That night, we celebrated under the stars, making plans for our future and promising forever to each other. The engagement party was an elaborate affair at her parents' waterfront home in San Diego. Both of our families flew in, and Jessica spared no expense planning every detail. My parents commented on how lucky I was to find someone so beautiful and accomplished. Her father gave a touching speech about welcoming me to the family. Everything seemed perfect. Looking back, I should have noticed the subtle changes that started about 6 months after our engagement. Jessica began staying later at work, often coming home well past 9 p.m. She became protective of her phone, always keeping it face down and taking calls in another room. When I asked about these changes, she dismissed my concerns, saying I was being paranoid and that her workload had simply increased. I wanted to believe her. Trust was important to me, and I refused to become the jealous, controlling type. For our 2-year engagement anniversary, I planned a special evening. I made reservations at Le Chateau, an upscale French restaurant that Jessica had been hinting at wanting to try. The place required bookings months in advance, but I managed to secure a table through a client who knew the owner. I also purchased a vintage Cartier watch. She had been eyeing stretching my budget considerably, but believing it worth every cent to see her smile. The morning of our anniversary, I texted her about our 7 p.m. reservation. Hours passed with no response, which was unusual since Jessica was typically glued to her phone. Finally, around 4 p.m., she called, her voice rushed and distant. There was an emergency client situation, she explained. The Tokyo account was threatening to pull out, and she needed to spend the evening preparing a new pitch with Andrew, her boss. I offered to reschedule for the weekend, trying to hide my disappointment. She agreed quickly, almost relieved, promising to make it up to me. That should have been another red flag. Deflated but understanding, I decided to head home early. The rain had started coming down heavily, creating a gloomy backdrop that matched my mood. I was approaching an intersection when the light turned green. I proceeded forward, not seeing the black SUV running the red light from the cross street until it was too late. The impact came from my left side, sending my car spinning across the wet pavement. The airbag deployed, and then darkness. I woke up to the steady beeping of hospital monitors and the sterile smell of antiseptic. A doctor explained that I had 3 broken ribs, a concussion, and numerous cuts and bruises. They wanted to keep me overnight for observation due to the head injury. My first clear thought was of Jessica. Had anyone called her? Was she worried? Jessica arrived about an hour later looking immaculate in her business attire despite the late hour. Instead of rushing to my side, she stood at the foot of the bed, her expression more annoyed than concerned. She asked about my condition in the same tone she might use to inquire about a delayed meeting. I must have looked pathetic with tubes attached to my arms and monitors tracking my vitals because she sighed deeply before sitting in the visitor chair. She kept glancing at her watch, and after about 20 minutes, she stood abruptly. The Tokyo account was still in crisis, she explained. Andrew needed her back at the office. They had an international call scheduled in half an hour. She promised to return the next morning with fresh clothes and proper food, kissing my forehead so quickly. I barely felt it before she was gone, the scent of her expensive perfume lingering longer than her presence. The next day came and went with no sign of Jessica. I called her several times, each call going straight to voicemail. By evening, worry had begun to replace disappointment. It was unlike her to break promises regardless of how busy she was. A nurse brought me hospital food that tasted like cardboard, and I found myself staring at the door, hoping Jessica would walk through it with the Thai takeout she had promised. Instead, it was my best friend Travis who appeared carrying a paper bag that smelled of actual food and wearing an expression that told me something was wrong. He asked about my injuries, made jokes about how I could milk this for sympathy, and generally tried to keep things light. But there was tension around his eyes that spoke volumes. I waited for him to bring up Jessica, but when he carefully avoided any mention of her, I finally asked. Travis hesitated, focusing intently on unwrapping the sandwich he had brought. "Just swamped at work," he said, with a shrug that seemed too casual. I defended her instantly, explaining about the Tokyo account and the crisis she was handling. Travis nodded, but said nothing more, changing the subject to a basketball game from the night before. That night, our anniversary, I lay awake despite the pain medication. The clock on the wall ticked past midnight and I reached for my phone one more time, hoping to see a message from Jessica. Nothing. I sent her a simple text, "Miss you, happy anniversary," then tried to sleep, telling myself that tomorrow would be different. At 2:15 a.m., my phone chimed. I fumbled for it, eagerly wincing as the movement sent pain shooting through my ribs. The screen lit up with a message from Jessica. My heart sank as I read those 3 cruel words in all caps, "Happy anniversary, failure." I stared at the message, reading it over and over, convinced I must be misunderstanding. I tried calling her immediately, only to discover her number had blocked me. I texted again from my hospital bed asking what was happening, begging for an explanation. My messages showed as delivered but remained unread. Sleep was impossible after that, my mind racing with confusion and hurt as pain medication wore off, making the physical agony match the emotional. Travis returned the following afternoon, bringing more food and a change of clothes. One look at my face told him something had happened. When I showed him the message, his expression shifted from surprise to a kind of grim resignation that set alarm bells ringing in my head. "What do you know?" I demanded. Travis sighed heavily before sitting in the chair beside my bed. He had been trying to figure out how to tell me, he said. Jessica had been seeing someone else. Someone from work. I felt my stomach twist into knots as I asked the question I already knew the answer to. Andrew Jackson, her boss. According to Travis, they had been together for at least 6 months, possibly longer. I refused to believe it at first, accusing Travis of misunderstanding or spreading gossip. But then he showed me something on his phone that made the room seem to tilt. A social media post from a mutual acquaintance who worked in finance. The post showed a luxury resort in Napa Valley. In the background of one photo, slightly blurred but unmistakable, were Jessica and Andrew, his arm around her waist, as they stood waiting for valet parking. The timestamp was from the previous day, when I had been lying in the hospital after my accident. The betrayal cut deep, but there was worse to come. When Travis helped me check my bank accounts from my phone, I discovered large withdrawals from our joint savings account, the money I had been putting aside for our home. The transactions traced back several months, escalating recently to fund shopping sprees at luxury boutiques. Credit card statements showed charges for designer handbags, jewelry, and weekend getaways, all during times Jessica had claimed to be working late or visiting her sister. But the final blow came when Travis reluctantly showed me a series of messages between Jessica and her friend Megan that had been posted publicly on a social platform they thought was private. In them, Jessica referred to me as her stepping stone, laughing about how my connections at work and stable finances had helped her position herself for bigger things. She described Andrew as her real match, someone with ambition and influence who could give her the lifestyle she deserved. There I was lying broken in a hospital bed, while the woman I loved mocked me to her friends. Over the next few days, as I recovered enough to be discharged, more details emerged about Andrew Jackson and his relationship with Jessica. He was 45, 15 years older than Jessica, and 11 years older than me. Though still technically married, he had been separated from his wife for nearly a year. They had 2 children, ages 8 and 10. As chairman of the company board, he had significant influence over promotions and department budgets. Jessica had risen quickly, under his mentorship, bypassing more experienced colleagues for her director position. Travis, who worked in the human resources department, confirmed that their relationship violated company policy regarding supervisor relationships. But Andrew had enough power to ignore such policies, and Jessica was clearly benefiting from his protection. When I was discharged from the hospital, Travis drove me home, waiting anxiously in the car. As I entered the apartment Jessica and I had shared for the past year, the place felt hollow, emptied of her presence and many of our shared possessions. Designer items I had gifted her were gone, along with electronics, artwork, and anything else of significant value. On the kitchen counter sat her engagement ring with a handwritten note, too small for my caliber. The 3-carat diamond that had cost me nearly 2 months' salary dismissed as inadequate. Family photos had been removed from frames, some torn in half, and left scattered on the floor like confetti after a party no one enjoyed. I sank onto the couch, still tender from my injuries, and felt a numbness spreading through me that had nothing to do with pain medication. Travis found me there, staring at the wall, and quietly began picking up the apartment. He stayed with me that night, sleeping on the couch while I tossed and turned in what now felt like an oversized empty bed. The following week was a blur of painful discoveries. I learned that Jessica had used my credit cards to book first-class tickets to the Maldives for her and Andrew. She had put down deposits on wedding venues, apparently planning their ceremony just 6 months in the future. Most disturbing of all, she had used my personal information to apply for loans in my name, leaving me with debt I had never agreed to. As my physical injuries began to heal, I felt a resolve hardening within me. This woman had not only betrayed my trust and broken my heart, but had systematically worked to destroy my financial stability and reputation. I contacted a lawyer specializing in financial fraud and identity theft. We documented every unauthorized transaction, gathered evidence of accounts opened in my name, and prepared to take legal action. The lawyer assured me that with the evidence we had, Jessica would face serious consequences for her actions. Looking at the engagement ring still sitting on my counter, I made a decision. The diamond market had actually appreciated significantly since my purchase, and a jeweler friend of Travis offered me nearly twice what I had paid. The money helped cover my hospital bills, not covered by insurance, and gave me a small cushion as I rebuilt my life. Selling the ring felt symbolic, a cutting of ties with the future I had planned with Jessica. There was a strange lightness that came with letting it go, as if the weight of those hopes and dreams had been physically embodied in that band of platinum and diamond. I felt myself beginning to breathe more easily despite my still healing ribs. Then came a discovery that changed everything. While cleaning out the guest room closet where Jessica had kept some of her lesser-used items, I found a locked wooden box pushed to the back corner, partially hidden under old winter clothes she had deemed not worth taking. The box looked antique with brass fittings and a small keyhole. I remembered Jessica mentioning a collection of vintage watches inherited from her grandfather, a passionate collector who had passed away shortly before we met. She had always kept them secure and rarely displayed them, calling them her rainy day insurance. After some careful work with tools borrowed from Travis, I managed to open the box without damaging it. Inside, nestled in custom velvet compartments, were 7 vintage watches representing some of the most sought-after models from luxury brands. There was a 1952 Rolex Submariner, an early Patek Philippe Calatrava, a rare Omega Speedmaster, and others I could not immediately identify. Jessica had apparently forgotten them in her haste to remove her valuables, or perhaps believed they would be safe in their hiding place until she could retrieve them later. For several days I contemplated what to do with the watches. Legally, they were clearly her property, inherited family heirlooms, with both monetary and sentimental value. Morally, however, I found myself weighing them against the money she had taken from me, the fraudulent loans in my name, and the emotional devastation she had so carelessly inflicted. I consulted my lawyer, who advised me that keeping the watches could potentially be seen as theft, regardless of Jessica's actions. However, he suggested that they might be considered as offsetting damages in any settlement regarding the funds she had taken from our joint accounts and the fraudulent use of my identity. The law was complicated in such situations, and without formal legal proceedings, there was a gray area regarding possession of items left behind in a shared residence. After much consideration, I made a decision that felt right, if not entirely by the book. I would consider the watches as collateral for the money Jessica had stolen from me. I contacted Barrett Auctions, a prestigious firm specializing in luxury timepieces and collectibles. Their expert authenticated each piece and confirmed what I had suspected: the collection was worth significantly more than I had imagined, with an estimated auction value approaching $300,000. We scheduled an online auction for the following month, giving time for proper marketing to international collectors. The morning the auction listing went live, featuring professional photographs and detailed descriptions of each timepiece, my phone exploded with notifications. Jessica had discovered the auction. Her first message was pure rage, threatening legal action, police involvement, and personal retribution. When I did not respond, her tone shifted dramatically. She pleaded about the sentimental value of the watches, how they were her last connection to her beloved grandfather. She offered to return some of the money she had taken in exchange for canceling the auction. When emotional manipulation failed, she tried one last approach: she could get Andrew to pull strings, help me secure a promotion at work, ensure my career advancement if only I would return her precious watches. I saved every message but responded to none. Instead, I forwarded them to my lawyer, who advised me to continue maintaining no contact. Andrew also called, his tone alternating between authoritative demands befitting his corporate position and barely veiled threats about my professional future. I recorded these conversations, adding them to my growing file of evidence. The day of the auction arrived with unexpected media attention. A watch collector blog had picked up the story of the rare pieces coming to market, and word had spread through luxury timepiece forums. What began as a simple online auction transformed into something of an event in collector circles. Bidders from around the world participated, driving prices far beyond the initial estimates. By the time the final gavel fell virtually, the collection had sold for just over $900,000, triple the conservative estimate. The auction house took their percentage, but I was left with a sum that exceeded all the money Jessica had taken from me, the loans she had opened, and my medical expenses combined. The story might have ended there with a financial victory that helped ease the sting of betrayal, but there was an unexpected epilogue. A reporter covering the auction for a luxury lifestyle publication had become curious about the sudden appearance of these rare watches on the market. Through investigation that I neither assisted nor impeded, they uncovered the connection to Jessica and Andrew, along with rumors of their relationship within the company. This caught the attention of Nexus Technologies board members, who were less than pleased to discover their chairman engaged in a relationship that violated company policy, particularly one that had resulted in questionable promotions and preferential treatment. An internal investigation was launched, and within weeks both Jessica and Andrew were facing disciplinary actions. Jessica eventually resigned, while Andrew received a formal reprimand and was removed from certain leadership committees. As for me, I used the auction proceeds wisely. After settling all debts and medical bills, I invested in advanced technology certifications that significantly increased my market value as a software engineer. I purchased a modest but comfortable condo in a quiet neighborhood across town, a fresh start in a place with no memories of Jessica. Most importantly, I set aside funds for therapy, recognizing that the emotional wounds needed professional attention just as my physical injuries had. The healing process was neither quick nor linear. There were days when anger consumed me, when I obsessively reread old messages looking for signs I had missed. There were nights when I dreamed of our planned future, waking with a hollow ache in my chest. But gradually those moments became less frequent and less intense. I joined a support group for survivors of relationship betrayal, finding solace in the stories of others who had experienced similar pain and emerged stronger. I reconnected with friends I had neglected during my relationship with Jessica, rebuilding a social circle based on genuine connections rather than status or appearances. I developed new interests, taking cooking classes, and joining a hiking club activities Jessica had always dismissed as beneath her. Physical exercise became a crucial part of my recovery both for my injured body and troubled mind. Long runs along the river helped clear my thoughts, and weight training rebuilt my strength along with my confidence. I found myself sleeping better, eating healthier, and gradually rediscovering the person I had been before Jessica had begun reshaping me into someone I barely recognized. Looking back now, I can see the warning signs that were there from the beginning. The way Jessica measured everything and everyone by their material value or social utility. Her constant reaching for the next rung on the ladder regardless of who she needed to step on to get there. Her dismissal of my family for their modest lifestyle, and her embarrassment at my practical approach to finances. The real failure was not seeing these red flags for what they were, instead interpreting them as ambition and sophistication. I no longer harbor anger toward Jessica. That emotion requires energy I prefer to direct elsewhere. Instead, I feel a strange gratitude. Her betrayal, painful as it was, freed me from a life that would have been built on false foundations. Had we married, the inevitable collapse would have come later, perhaps with children involved, with deeper financial entanglements, with even more years invested in a relationship fundamentally flawed from its beginning. The experience taught me to value integrity and honesty above charm and outward success. It showed me the importance of actions over words, of consistency over grand gestures. Most importantly, it revealed my own resilience, a strength I might never have discovered without being pushed to my breaking point. Today, I am open to the possibility of love again, but with wiser eyes and stronger boundaries. I recognize now that true connection cannot be measured in carats or square footage or job titles. It exists in the quiet moments of genuine support and shared values and mutual respect, in the willingness to grow together rather than using another as a ladder for personal advancement. The betrayal that once felt like an ending became instead a beginning, a painful but necessary redirection toward an authentic life. For that unexpected gift, I can now say without bitterness, thank you, Jessica. Your greatest failure was not seeing my true value, and it became my greatest salvation. Have you ever experienced a betrayal that eventually led to something better in your life? Share your story in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to my channel for more real-life stories about overcoming life's challenges. Hit that share button if you know someone who might need to hear that. Sometimes what feels like rock bottom is actually a foundation for something better. Thank you for listening, and remember, your worth is not determined by those who fail to see it.